Hello there. Welcome to The Sleepless Scientist, where your imagination can roam even while you rest. Tonight, I want you to step gently into a story that stretches across a span of time almost too vast for the human mind to hold. As you lie in your bed, safe and warm, think of this. You, a modern human, have lived only a flicker compared to those who came before. Homo sapiens, our species, has been around for roughly 300,000 years, a blink, a breath. Now compare that to Homo erectus, who survived, adapted, and thrived for nearly 2 million years. 2 million, when you say the number, it feels heavy in your mouth, almost impossible, like a stone you can't quite lift. And here's the cheeky reality check. You probably won't survive this night without drifting into sleep. But Homo erectus, they endured night after night, generation after generation, for a span of time that dwarfs all of recorded history. That is why their story matters. As you settle, I'll ask, where are you listening from right now? What time glows on your clock? Are you under a blanket? Phone propped in your hand, eyes already growing heavy. Maybe you've stumbled here out of sleepless curiosity. Wherever you are, leave a comment below when you wake, like this video, and perhaps subscribe if you want to keep wandering through time with me. Now, close your eyes a little tighter and imagine the world as it was long before pyramids or cities or written words. The tale begins in Africa, where the earth's breath was hotter and drier, where savannahs unfurled like golden seas and forests crouched in shadows along rivers. You trudge through the grass, barefoot in imagination, and you see them, tall figures, walking upright with a confidence that earlier hominins never quite possessed. Homo erectus. They are not apes, not in the way you might picture hairy ancestors crouched with sticks. Their bodies are lean, shoulders broad, legs long for striding. They look startlingly familiar. From a distance, if they were clothed, you might mistake them for distant cousins. What makes them remarkable is not just their shape, but their sheer persistence. While empires rise and fall in our brief history, while inventions flicker and vanish within centuries, Homo erectus carried the torch of humanity across continents for 20 times longer than our species has even existed. Africa was their cradle, yes, but soon their feet pressed into soils of Asia and Europe, making them the first humans to truly walk the wider earth. Think of the vastness of that spread. In Indonesia, their bones rest beneath layers of volcanic ash. In Georgia, at a site called Damanisi, skulls whisper stories of their early migration. Fossils in Kenya, in China, in so many scattered places, tell of a species that was not confined, not fragile, but bold. If you could hover above the earth 2 million years ago and watch, you'd see bands of them moving along rivers, across valleys, through forests, leaving footprints in damp earth that would one day harden into stone records for us to find. And those footprints matter. At Ilerite in Kenya, researchers discovered prints preserved in ancient mud, aligned in steady rows. When you place your modern foot alongside them, the resemblance is uncanny. The arch, the heel-to-toe roll, the stride length, they walked as you do. And that realization is quietly humbling. You are not learning about some alien other, but about humans, earlier than you, who lived fully in their time. Their endurance was not luck alone. Imagine the challenges: predators prowling at night, climates shifting between wet and dry cycles, landscapes that could kill with drought or flood. Yet Homo erectus adapted. Their bodies shed heavy coats of hair, leaving skin bare and slick with sweat, a living cooling system. That change was not cosmetic, it was survival itself. It allowed them to chase prey across scorching plains, to keep running when other animals collapsed from heat. That ability, persistence hunting, meant they could outlast antelopes, zebras, even small elephants, until the exhausted creature stumbled and fell. You feel your own heartbeat quicken at the thought. To run not with speed, but with unending endurance was their weapon, and in their hands were stones shaped with precision. They began with crude flakes, sharp-edged pebbles that could cut flesh and crack bone. But soon something more elegant appeared: Acheulean hand axes, teardrop-shaped, symmetrical, made with a vision of what the stone could become. This was not instinct, this was imagination. To pick up a rough rock and see within it a tool that did not yet exist. That is a spark of the modern mind. And here's a quirky tidbit. One site in Spain revealed a cache of hand axes buried neatly together, dozens of them unused, almost like an ancient display. Scientists still argue whether it was a workshop, a symbolic act, or even a ritual offering. Was it practical, or was it art before art? You might wonder, what did they sound like? If one stood beside your bed now and spoke, would you understand? The answer remains uncertain. Their throats, their tongues, their brains were not quite ours. Scientists still argue whether Homo erectus had language in the sense we do, or whether they spoke in gestures, grunts and simple calls. But the evidence of coordinated hunts and shared tool-making traditions hints that communication, in some form, was there. They could teach, they could plan, they could say, in whatever tongue they had, "Tomorrow we hunt," and when you picture their nights, imagine firelight. This is another contested mystery. Some archaeologists claim evidence of controlled fire at sites nearly 1.5 million years old. Others doubt it, suggesting the charred remains were natural burns. Still, by about 400,000 years ago, the evidence is undeniable. Hearths, ashes, fire pits carefully arranged. Fire was not only warmth and safety, it was community. Around a blaze, faces glow, stories are told, whether in words or gestures, and bonds form stronger than stone. Perhaps that was the cradle of culture itself. What's most striking is that Homo erectus did not simply endure passively. They expanded into environments from sweltering equatorial forests to chilly highlands. Some evidence even suggests they reached islands across deep waters, Flores, Timor, Roti, meaning they may have built rafts and crossed seas. If true, this makes them the earliest mariners in history, a feat of courage and ingenuity that still puzzles researchers today. Did they drift accidentally on rafts of vegetation, or did they carve boats with deliberate hands? Scientists still argue, but the presence of their bones on those islands is undeniable. And so you breathe out slowly, realizing for 2 million years they met every challenge: predators, droughts, migrations, rival species. They cared for their wounded too. Skulls show healed fractures, jaws with missing teeth worn smooth by years of survival, without chewing. Someone must have helped them eat, helped them live. Compassion, tenderness, the earliest roots of what you might call humanity, those too were theirs. Tonight, as your eyes grow heavy, you hold that truth. You are not the first to fight for survival under strange skies. You are not the first to imagine tomorrow's tool, tomorrow's fire, tomorrow's story. Homo erectus walked this earth long before you, and in a way they still walk within you. You follow the trail of those footprints deeper into time, and with each imagined step the world around you shifts. The grasses sway higher, the air is heavy with dust and heat, and strange sounds echo in the distance. The cough of a leopard, the bellow of ancient elephants, the quick drumming of hooves. Here, 2 million years ago, the earth feels untamed, wild in ways you can barely imagine. Yet in that wilderness, Homo erectus is already leaving a mark that will endure long after their bones crumble. Picture a cluster of them moving slowly along a river's edge. They walk upright, balanced, scanning the horizon. Children follow close, their smaller footprints pressed between those of adults. Each step imprints not just in mud, but into deep time, a record that one day will tell us that here, in this moment, humans were already walking confidently into the future. At Anilaret in Kenya, those very footprints hardened into stone, discovered by modern eyes as if the earth itself had kept a diary, and when you see them, aligned in neat procession, you recognize something startling. They look like your own. The arches, the stride, the pattern of pressure, human in every way, but those steps were not only in Africa, they carried these early travelers far from their birthplace. Fossils found in Dmanisi, Georgia, show that Homo erectus had already left Africa by 1.8 million years ago, venturing into unfamiliar landscapes. Imagine the courage required: no maps, no tools beyond stone blades, no knowledge of what lay ahead, only curiosity, hunger, and the unbreakable drive to keep moving. They did not just survive in Africa's heat. They spread into the forests of Southeast Asia, the plains of Europe, even the volcanic islands of Indonesia. Their journey was the first great expansion of humanity, the first proof that this species was not bound by geography. It is almost dizzying to think of the span. For nearly 2 million years, they endured. By contrast, everything you call civilization, writing, farming, cities, is younger than the blink of an eye. The Roman Empire, the Great Wall of China, the pyramids, your own existence, all of these come long after Homo erectus had already lived longer than we have yet managed. You close your eyes and imagine that weight of time pressing down like layers of stone. In this timeline, there are tantalizing questions about overlap. Fossils of Homo sapiens in Israel, dating back nearly 200,000 years, show that our species was stepping beyond Africa earlier than once thought. But in Java, Homo erectus lingered until about 100,000 years ago. Did our ancestors and theirs ever meet? Fossils have yet to prove it, but there is a stranger clue: head lice. Yes, those tiny, unwelcome creatures. Genetic studies show that two distinct lineages of lice diverged around 1.2 million years ago, one living on modern humans, another believed to have hitched rides on Homo erectus. For that divergence to happen, there must have been contact, some kind of physical closeness between species. It is an odd and almost comical way to imagine two humans brushing shoulders, united not by tools or fire, but by parasites. Scientists still argue over the meaning, but it's one of those quirky tidbits that remind you how tangled the threads of human history can be. Now, focus on the terrain beneath their feet. In East Africa, the Rift Valley gapes open with its lakes and volcanoes, a crucible for evolution. Here, climate oscillated between wet and dry phases, forcing life to adapt or vanish. Homo erectus proved flexible. When the rains came, they gathered fruits, roots, and fish from swollen rivers. When droughts scorched the earth, they followed herds of game into savannahs, tracking them with keen eyes and patient endurance. This adaptability, shifting diets, shifting habitats, is what allowed them to persist when others faded. The bones tell us much. From Java came the first discovery in 1891, when Eugene Dubois unearthed a skullcap and femur. At the time, it was a revelation, proof of a human ancestor outside Europe, proof that humanity's story was far older and more widespread than people had dared imagine. The skull showed a heavy brow ridge, a sloping forehead, a brain smaller than ours, but larger than any ape's. It was the first glimpse into the face of Homo erectus. Imagine the excitement, the disbelief, the debates that raged. Was this a missing link, a primitive man, or something else entirely? Later discoveries revealed more. Brain sizes ranging from 600 cubic centimeters in the earliest forms to over 1,200 in later ones. To put that in perspective, Einstein's brain was about 1,230. The thought lingers within those thick skulls-burned minds capable of more than instinct. They planned hunts, shaped tools, and perhaps even dreamed beneath the stars. Scientists still argue whether their rapid brain growth was fueled by cooking, by eating fatty fish, or by endurance hunting. The truth may be a blend of all. Their bodies too were varied. Some stood barely 5 feet tall, others stretched to 6. Some weighed as little as 40 kilograms, others closer to 70. This range speaks to phenotypic plasticity, the ability of a species to adapt physically to local environments. In warmer climates, bodies grew lean, long-limbed, shedding heat efficiently. In cooler places, they became stockier, conserving warmth. Sexual dimorphism was strong as well, with males generally larger, hinting at social structures perhaps influenced by competition or dominance. A quirky piece of evidence comes from healed skull fractures. One individual, struck hard enough to dent bone, lived on for years afterward. Was the injury from a fight, a ritual, or an accident? Scientists still argue. What matters is that he survived, and survival meant others must have helped. You imagine a group gathering food, preparing softer meals for one who could no longer chew, showing a kind of compassion that echoes across the millennia. And then there are the faces. Reconstructions show broad noses, forward jaws, strong brows. Their noses in particular were not just for breathing but for regulating moisture, a clever adaptation that let them thrive in both dry and humid climates. That long prominent bridge, something distinctly human, may have made the difference between survival and death in arid landscapes. Close your eyes again and hear the sounds of their world. The crunch of stone against stone as tools are struck from cores, the rustle of tall grasses as a group moves together, the hush of a night fire crackling, though perhaps it is still borrowed flame, rather than one they could kindle. You are there in spirit, watching a species whose steps echo into your own. 2 million years is hard to hold in your thoughts, but here as you listen, you let the weight of it settle gently, like a blanket. These were the first true wanderers, the first humans to claim the earth not by chance but by intent. Their footsteps are under your feet, still there, silent, guiding you deeper into their story. The figures you follow grow clearer now, their forms etched against the shifting sky. You study them not just as silhouettes but as beings with muscle, bone and faces that look both familiar and foreign. These are the first true humans in body, the first to stride through the world with a form that feels so close to your own. When you look at Homo erectus standing upright on the savannah, you are seeing the first reflection of yourself in deep time. Their skulls are distinct, heavy ridges above their eyes, casting shadows that lend them a stern, almost brooding expression. The forehead slopes back, the rear of the skull angles down, and yet inside those bones a brain grows larger than that of any ape. Early Homo erectus had cranial capacities between 600 and 800 cubic centimeters, already twice the size of a chimpanzee's. Over the millennia, the brain case expanded, eventually reaching as high as 1,230 cubic centimeters, a volume that brushes the edge of modern human ranges. Think of that. Inside the thick-boned heads of these beings lay sparks of thought not unlike your own. Perhaps not as quick, not as abstract, but glowing, persistent. You notice their jaws strong and jutting, with thinner enamel than earlier hominins. These teeth were not made for crushing nuts or stripping bark. They were adapted for brittle foods, for meat and marrow, processed with tools. Every bite was shaped by stone blades that sliced flesh, split bones and pried out the rich marrow hidden within. The tools were crude at first, then refined into the elegant symmetry of hand axes, each strike of flint against stone echoing with intention. Their bodies tell more stories. Some are short, barely 4 feet 9. Others are tall, reaching 6 feet 1, their legs long and powerful. Their weight ranges from 40 kilograms to nearly 70, depending on where they live and what food they find. This spread in height and build is what scientists call phenotypic plasticity, the ability of the same species to adapt physically to different environments. In cooler regions, they grow stockier, conserving warmth. In hot savannas, they are lean, built for endurance, their muscles coiled like springs, and there is sexual dimorphism, the difference between male and female bodies. The males are larger, heavier, stronger, their bones thicker. The females are slighter but equally resilient, bearing the burden of carrying and raising young. From this, scientists speculate on social structure. Perhaps males competed fiercely for mates, perhaps dominance mattered, perhaps bands were shaped by these differences. Yet the evidence also hints at cooperation, at group living, where survival depended not on one but on many. Scientists still argue where the balance lay. Were they driven by hierarchy or by collaboration? One day, long ago, rain fell in East Africa. The mud thickened and pooled. A group of Homo erectus crossed the wet ground, leaving footprints behind. Thousands of years later, those prints hardened, fossilized, and lay hidden until researchers uncovered them. At Ileret, the ancient trackway reveals more than steps. The footprints show arches, toe impressions, stride lengths, all like yours. They also reveal patterns of group movement, perhaps males walking together, females and children nearby. The size differences in the prints whisper of social bonds, of a life somewhere between the loose gatherings of apes and the organized bands of modern humans. You can almost feel them moving beside you, a living band, their prints pressing into the earth in rhythm. A quirky but haunting piece of evidence lies in healed skull fractures. Some fossils bear marks of trauma, depressions in bone, where blows landed hard, and yet the bone has regrown, meaning the individual survived. Was this the scar of a fight, a clash between rivals? Or was it ritual, a form of initiation, of marking? Scientists still argue, because the evidence is ambiguous, but the fact remains, Homo erectus could endure injury, could live on despite violence, suggesting that others must have helped them heal, tended their wounds, fed them when they could not chew. The face of Homo erectus is both alien and familiar. The nose is large and prominent, jutting outward. It is not just a feature, It is an adaptation, a way to humidify and warm dry air, to conserve moisture in harsh climates. Earlier hominins lacked this structure, but Homo erectus carried it proudly, a survival tool etched into bone. Imagine how vital it was, breathing hot dust or icy winds, each breath softened by the design of the nose. This single feature connects to your own, for you carry it too, the inheritance of survival. Their shoulders rotate like yours, built not for climbing trees, but for throwing. You picture a figure hurling a stone or a wooden spear with force, the rotation of the arm precise and powerful. This ability to throw at high speed may have been as critical as tools themselves, a way to bring down prey or drive away predators. Imagine the advantage, while other animals fled or fought with teeth. Homo erectus hurled missiles from a distance, an innovation of flesh and bone. Still, the growth of their young was not like ours. Fossil evidence shows that their brains grew faster in infancy, reaching 70 to 80% of adult size by the first year. In modern humans, the figure is closer to 50%. This meant childhood was shorter, learning compressed, maturity quicker. They did not linger in the long, slow development that characterizes Homo sapiens. Their children grew swiftly into adults, their societies shaped by faster cycles of life. Scientists still argue whether this meant less room for prolonged teaching, less complexity in culture. Yet even in that compressed span, they carried forward traditions of tool-making and survival. You see them moving now as a group, their forms lit by the glow of sun, or perhaps by a flicker of borrowed fire. Their bodies glisten with sweat, bare skin shining in the heat. That too is an adaptation, the loss of fur replaced with sweat glands, a living cooling system. Around 1.2 million years ago, this change transformed them into endurance hunters, able to run for hours, while prey collapsed from heat exhaustion. Fur was shed, but dark skin remained, pigmentation protecting them from the relentless sun. And here lies another fascinating puzzle. Fossils from northern regions show signs of bone disease linked to vitamin D deficiency. This hints that as Homo erectus moved into higher latitudes, skin may have lightened to let in more sunlight, to synthesize vitamin D. Imagine that, even then, the dance between sunlight and skin was shaping humanity. It's a story still written in your own body today. Their appearance was not fixed in one image. Across time and space, Homo erectus evolved, adapted, shifted. In Asia, skulls show subtle differences from those in Africa. For years, scientists debated whether they were truly one species or several. Homo ergaster in Africa, Homo erectus in Asia. But the consensus now bends toward unity. One species, stretching across continents, bending but not breaking beneath the weight of millennia. As you lie in bed, you can almost hear their breath, see their eyes catching light, feel the strength in their gait. They were not ghosts or shadows but people in their own right, living in ways both strange and deeply familiar. The first true humans in form, carrying bodies built to endure, to wander, to imagine tools not yet born. Their faces look out from time, and you realize they are not lost. They are waiting in your own reflection, in every breath you take, in every step your feet press into the earth. You stay close to those faces, and slowly your gaze drifts upward into the chambers of the skull, into the hidden engine that set this species apart. The story of Homo erectus is in so many ways the story of a brain that would not stop growing. In the earliest individuals, the brain case was already larger than anything in the ape world, around 600 cubic centimeters. That was enough to manage tools, enough to remember pathways across wide savannahs, enough to share food and tend fire when they stumbled upon it. But time was generous to them, and as centuries turned into millennia, that cranial vault expanded, swelling to over 1,200 cubic centimeters in some populations. By the later chapters of their 2 million-year span, they carried brains comparable to our own. Now you imagine what it must have felt like to carry such a mind. In early childhood, their brains grew faster than yours did. A Homo erectus infant reached nearly 80% of adult brain size within its first year, while a modern human child lingers at about 50. This meant shorter childhoods, quicker maturation, a faster climb into adult responsibility. The rhythm of life was compressed, the years of vulnerability cut down, but a trade-off lurked here. With less extended childhood, there may have been less time for complex teaching, fewer years to slowly build layers of culture. Scientists still argue whether this meant Homo erectus had simpler societies, or whether they packed knowledge into shorter bursts of learning. Yet even with less prolonged childhood, their brains managed wonders. Consider the Aeschylean hand axe, symmetrical, balanced, almost artistic in its form. This was not the product of instinctive strikes, but of planning. To picture the finished shape within a lump of stone, to hold that image in the mind and then bring it into being, required imagination. This was a spark of abstraction, a flicker of foresight. You pick up an imagined hand axe in your mind now, feel its weight, the smoothness of its crafted edges, and you know, this was not just a tool but an idea made solid. And their brains were not static. They changed across time and space, reflecting pressures of environment, climate, and diet. Some researchers believe that the control of fire, even in its earliest uncertain stages, played a role. Cooked food breaks down more easily, releasing energy more efficiently. A roasted tuber, or a charred piece of meat, provided more calories than raw food, fueling the hungry brain. Was fire the secret to their encephalization, or was it the steady consumption of omega-3 rich fish from rivers and coasts? Perhaps it was both, intertwined like strands of a rope. Scientists still argue, but in those debates you hear echoes of cooking fires and rippling streams, of meals that shaped minds. A quirky glimpse into their cognition comes from the shell engravings of Java. Around 430,000 years ago, a Homo erectus hand traced a zigzag pattern onto a freshwater mussel shell. The lines are deliberate, intersecting, repeating, not random scratches. Was this art? Was it idle doodling? Was it symbolic? Scientists still argue over its meaning, but the act itself reveals something crucial. A brain capable of making marks for reasons beyond pure survival. In those shallow grooves lies the whisper of imagination. You might ask, what about language? Could a Homo erectus individual have spoken to you, words tumbling from lips and throat, sentences carrying meaning? Their brains grew, yes, but not in the same configuration as yours. The frontal lobes were smaller, the spinal cord canals narrower, possibly limiting breath control for fine vocalization. Genetic evidence hints they may not have carried the modern form of the FOXP2 gene, a key player in language. Still, they were not mute. They could gesture, they could grunt, they could call. Their throats produced sounds, their hands shaped signals, and together those created a system robust enough to teach tool-making, to coordinate a hunt, to soothe a child. Imagine standing among them and hearing the chorus, not sentences as you know them, but a shared music of meaning, and there is more. With growing brains came growing social complexity. You picture them gathered in bands, small but cohesive, each member contributing. They hunted together, shared meals, and likely taught one another through demonstration. Knowledge of tool-making did not vanish with individuals. It endured across generations, carried forward not by instinct, but by teaching. That transfer of knowledge is a cultural inheritance, one that links them to you. At the same time, the brain was vulnerable. It consumed energy, demanded fuel. Without enough food, cognition faltered. This pressure may have driven them into new landscapes, searching always for richer grounds, chasing herds across grasslands, fishing in rivers, collecting roots in forests. The hunger of the brain was a compass, pushing Homo erectus out of Africa and into the wide world. And yet, despite their growing mental capacity, there were limits. Their art was rare, their symbolism uncertain, their rituals faint shadows at best. You might wonder why, if their brains were so large, they did not create cities, temples, or written words. The answer lies in the delicate interplay of brain structure, social size, and communication. They had the hardware, perhaps, but not yet the software. The potential was there, the path already opening, but the flowering of language and culture would come later, with Homo sapiens and their close kin. Still, the achievements of Homo erectus are extraordinary. They solved problems across continents, adapted to climates from scorching savannas to chilly plateaus, and endured predators that stalked them relentlessly. Their brains gave them foresight, letting them build shelters against wind, control fire when they could, and craft tools that outlasted generations. Think of the longevity. For 2 million years this brain, slowly growing, slowly shifting, carried humanity forward. For comparison, your species has existed for less than a fifth of that span. In that light, The brain of Homo erectus was not a primitive relic, but a masterpiece of endurance. It may not have sung poetry or written code, but it carved out survival against odds you cannot imagine. As you drift closer to sleep, imagine yourself lying in a cave, a small fire flickering, a stone axe resting by your side. Around you others breathe softly, the band gathered for warmth. Above the stars blaze, untouched, the same stars you see through your window. In your skull, a brain beats with thoughts of tomorrow, where to find water, where to chase the herds, how to teach a child the grip of stone. You are Homo erectus now, mind humming, heart steady, alive in the deep night of time. The night deepens, and you notice a flicker ahead. At first it is no more than a glow on the horizon, a shimmer against the dark, but as you step closer, you realize what you are seeing. Not lightning, not the sudden flare of a volcano, but a hearth, a circle of flame guarded and fed by human hands. In the glow sit Homo erectus, their faces lit gold, shadows dancing behind them. The warmth presses against the cool air, the smoke coils into the sky. It is here, in this contested space of history, that the first controlled fires may have burned. The evidence is scattered, delicate as ash itself. At sites in Africa, in Israel, in China, archaeologists have found traces, blackened bones, scorched earth, pockets of charcoal that whisper of ancient flames. Some of these date back 1.5 million years, suggesting fire in the hands of Homo erectus. Yet scientists still argue whether these were true hearths or simply wildfires, borrowed flames that burned for a night and then died. What is certain is that by 400,000 years ago, fire was no longer just an accident of nature. It was a companion, a tool, a protector. Imagine the awe of that first moment, when flame was not feared but tended. Perhaps it began with lightning striking a tree, the fire spreading until one brave hand reached to hold a branch alight. The flames hiss, the heat stings, but the reward is worth it. Warmth through cold nights, light against the dark, a shield against predators whose eyes gleam from beyond the circle. You picture yourself there, squatting with the group, watching sparks rise like stars. The crackle becomes music, the glow becomes story. Fire changed everything. With it, food transformed. Raw tubers, bitter and hard, softened in flame, releasing calories more easily digested. Meat roasted, becoming safer, richer. Marrow boiled from bones. Each meal fed not just the body, but the hungry brain, fueling its expansion. Scientists still debate whether fire was the true catalyst for encephalization, the growth of that great Homo erectus brain. Yet the timing feels right. As flames spread, so did thought. Beyond food, fire stretched the day. Before flame, night was brief, a time of hiding, of sleep, of waiting for dawn. With fire, night opened. Hours could be filled with conversation, with teaching, with grooming and bonding. Gathered around a blaze, Homo erectus may have exchanged gestures, shared plans, comforted children. In the circle of light, the first seeds of storytelling may have been planted, the rhythm of culture beating against the hush of darkness. And there was safety. Predators feared the flames, hyenas, lions, saber-toothed cats, all kept at bay by the wall of light. Around the hearth, humans could rest more soundly, less hunted, less fragile. That comfort alone may have allowed their bands to flourish. Imagine the relief, no longer forever on guard, but able to lean back, to close eyes, to dream. Quirky hints of early fire use surface in unexpected places. In South Africa, deep within caves, archaeologists have found layers of ash intermingled with stone tools, suggesting that Homo erectus deliberately brought fire into enclosed spaces. In one site, burned bones and plant remains lie in concentrated patches, as if meals were cooked together. Yet skeptics remind us, natural fires can also leave such traces. Scientists still argue, weighing the patterns, the chemistry of ash, the placement of charred stones. The debate itself speaks to the fragility of evidence. Fire, after all, consumes its own history. Still, by the time you move through the timeline to around 700,000 years ago, fire use becomes undeniable. Hearths appear in Europe and Asia, circles of stone surrounding ash, repeated again and again, across layers of time. This is mastery, not accident. By then, Homo erectus had learned not only to keep flame alive, but to kindle it when needed. Perhaps they struck sparks from flint, perhaps they nursed embers from dried grass, blowing gently until the blaze roared. However they managed it, they carried fire with them like a secret sun. Picture the transformations. Fire softened hides, making them pliable for shelters or clothing. It hardened wooden spear tips, giving hunters sharper weapons. It allowed resin to melt, stones to crack, landscapes to be reshaped. Whole ecosystems bore its mark as Homo erectus learned to clear brush, to flush animals, to make the land yield more. Fire was not just survival, it was control, and control of fire touched the emotional world too. The hearth became a center. Bands gathered, meals were shared, bonds deepened. Around flames, faces glowed with expression, gestures were magnified by light. The hypnotic dance of fire soothed minds, encouraged reflection. Perhaps the first songs were hummed here, the first dances performed in flickering shadows, the first laughter shared. You imagine sitting there yourself, knees drawn to chest, watching sparks drift upward. A child beside you claps at the sparks, an elder hums low, and the night stretches long but safe. Of course, the story is not uniform. Some groups may have used fire often, others rarely. Some may have mastered fire-making, others relied on chance lightning strikes. The record is uneven, the picture incomplete. Yet even in uncertainty, one truth shines. Fire was a turning point. Without it, Homo erectus could not have thrived across such vast ranges, from the chill of Eurasia to the humidity of Indonesia. Fire made cold bearable, made food richer, made predators weaker. Consider this as you breathe. Every warm meal you have, every candle lit, every stove or hearth you gather around, traces back to those ancient flames. You are heir to the fire Homo erectus carried. And as you lie here in the glow of your own screens, you realize that the need is the same: warmth, light, safety, and the comfort of gathering together in the dark. The flames flicker lower now, in your imagination. Ash settles, sparks fade, and still the warmth remains. Fire is more than heat, it is continuity, the thread of humanity glowing across 2 million years, and as you drift, you know that without those flames, your own story would never have been written. The fire burns low behind you, embers glowing like red eyes in the dark, and your path carries you forward into the sound of stone striking stone. The rhythm is sharp, deliberate, echoing in the still air like a heartbeat made of rock. Here, Homo erectus reveals another secret of survival: their tools, not just broken shards of luck, but crafted implements born of vision. Imagine picking up a smooth river cobble, its weight firm in your palm. You lift another stone and bring it down, hard, at just the right angle. Chips fly, sharp as glass, slicing your fingertip if you're careless. You turn the cobble, strike again, and slowly the rough form of a cutting edge appears. This was the earliest toolkit of Homo erectus. Alderwood flakes and cores, simple yet effective. With them, flesh was stripped from bone, roots sliced, hides cut into strips. The world of survival widened with every shard of stone, but over time, something changed. The blows grew more precise, the shapes more deliberate. Out of rough cobbles emerged symmetry, hand axes, bifacial tools with teardrop shapes so consistent they appear across continents and centuries. This was the Acheulean tradition, lasting more than 1,000,000 years with little alteration. Hold one in your hand, in imagination or in a museum, and you can feel the mind behind it. These axes were not random. They required planning, striking flakes in sequence, shaping edges evenly, envisioning a final form. That vision, that ability to picture what did not yet exist, was a revolution of the mind, and the tools endured. For countless generations, the Acheulean hand axe was the Swiss Army knife of prehistory. It sliced meat, dug for tubers, broke open bones, scraped hides. Its form was so efficient that it barely changed across ages, a perfection in simplicity. You can picture a group of Homo erectus seated together, striking flakes, teaching children by demonstration. The rhythm of stone knapping becomes a kind of language. This strike, this angle, this pressure. The knowledge flows not through words but through hands, from elder to child, across 1,000,000 years. Yet tools were not limited to stone. In some sites, shells bear edges sharpened for cutting, bones show signs of shaping, and even bolas, weighted stones tied together, may have been hurled at prey. Scientists still argue whether such tools truly belonged to Homo erectus or to later cousins, but the evidence lingers like shadows, and at Terre Marta in France, traces of shelters show stones arranged to weigh down branch huts, fire pits nestled inside. Tools built homes as much as they carved meals. A quirky discovery lies in Spain, where archaeologists unearthed a pile of finely crafted hand axes buried together. They were unused, sharp, as if stored or offered. Why? Was it a workshop, a cache for future hunts? Or was it something more symbolic, a ritual deposit, a statement beyond utility? Scientists still debate, but the image lingers: dozens of perfect tools, their edges gleaming in the light, resting silently for hundreds of thousands of years, until modern hands uncovered them. To use tools is one thing, to imagine them is another. Homo erectus did not wait for nature to hand them solutions. They shaped the world. With each strike of stone, they declared themselves makers, not just takers. Their minds bent raw material into new forms, anticipating needs before they arose. This foresight is part of what made them endure so long. Think of the cultural continuity implied. Aeolian tools appear from Africa to Europe to Asia, stretching across continents. The same design carried for over 1,000,000 years, passed through uncountable generations. This was not instinct, like a bird building a nest. It was teaching, a chain of knowledge preserved in hands and eyes. You are holding one of those tools in your imagination now, and as you trace its edge, you realize you are touching not just stone but memory, carried through time. Their tool-making also reveals their patience. Canoping stone is not easy. It requires precision, control, and a tolerance for failure. A wrong strike ruins the core, wasting effort. Yet they persisted, learning by doing, honing skills slowly. Picture a child watching, imitating, failing, trying again, until finally the flakes fall just right. This is not only technology but education, the roots of culture itself, and these tools changed their diet, their bodies, their lives. With sharp edges, they accessed marrow, brains, rich nutrients, locked inside bones. They sliced meat into smaller pieces, easier to chew and digest. This reduced pressure on teeth and jaws, reshaping faces over generations. Tools transformed biology. They were not just extensions of the hand, they rewrote what the hand and mouth required. Scientists still argue whether the apparent conservatism of Homo erectus, the long persistence of Aeolian hand axes with little innovation, reflects stability or stagnation. Some suggest they were unimaginative, stuck in tradition. Others argue that the design was simply perfect, needing no change. And perhaps the truth is subtler. Innovation did happen, but in small ways, in organic tools, in shelters, in fire use, where traces are harder to find. The silence of the archaeological record may not mean absence but invisibility. As the sparks of your imagined campfire fade, you hear the clink of stone still ringing, echoing across 2,000,000 years. Each blow is a message, a declaration. We can shape, we can plan, we can endure. You realize that when you hold a knife in your kitchen, when you sketch an idea before building it, you are repeating the same act, imagining a future object, then making it real. Homo erectus lived in that space first, bridging thought and creation. Their tools were more than survival, they were identity. Wherever they wandered, they left behind scatters of stone, little signatures of presence, across valleys and coasts, over mountains and islands. Their legacy lies in these chips and flakes. If all other traces vanished, the bones, the shelters, the fires, the stones alone would prove their story. A species that saw more in the world than what was given. A species that remade the earth with imagination and persistence. And as you sink deeper into the calm of this night, you know that each tick of your clock, each hum of your modern world, rests upon those ancient strikes of stone. Homo erectus, with their blades and axes, carved the path you now walk. The sound of stone against stone fades, and in its place you hear another rhythm. The pounding of feet across earth, the steady thud of bodies in motion. Dust rises, heat wavers, and you realize you are watching a hunt. Not the quick, lunging ambush of a lion, Not the sudden sprint of a cheetah, but something different, a pursuit measured not in minutes but in hours. This is the long chase, the art of persistence hunting, where patience and endurance turn frailty into power. Picture a herd of antelope grazing on the horizon. The animals are fast, faster than any human can sprint, their hooves striking the ground like drums. A small band of Homo erectus crouches in the grass, their eyes fixed on one target, with a silent signal, perhaps a gesture of the hand, perhaps a low grunt. They rise and begin to run. The antelope bolts, leaping and fleeing, far outstripping the humans. Yet the chase does not end. The humans follow, not in speed but in certainty. Step by step, mile by mile, they keep moving. Here lies the genius of the body they carried. Their long legs and springy tendons conserve energy. Their hairless skin releases heat through sweat. Their lungs draw air in rhythm. No other predator could run like this in the burning sun. A lion would overheat in minutes, forced to rest in the shade, but Homo erectus kept going, fueled by persistence. Over hours the antelope slowed, its body overheated, lungs gasped, hooves stumbled, and still the humans pressed on, tireless shadows under the sky. At last, when the animal could run no more, they closed in, weapons raised. Victory was not speed but patience. You imagine yourself in that chase, your heartbeat echoing theirs, your breath steady. The sun blazes overhead, sweat slicks your skin, your muscles ache but still move. You are built for this. Every step affirms your survival, and when the prey collapses, when the kill is made, you feel the surge of triumph that kept Homo erectus alive for nearly 2 million years. Their endurance was extraordinary. Studies of modern persistence hunters, rare groups who still practice this ancient method, show that a human body, properly adapted, can run for up to 5.5 hours without water, in searing heat, without collapse. This was the edge of Homo erectus, not claws, not fangs, but endurance. Predators of patience, hunters of time itself. Of course, not every meal came from a chase. Their diet was flexible, opportunistic. They gathered fruits and roots, dug for tubers, cracked open nuts. They hunted small game, birds, reptiles, even insects. By rivers they fished, by coasts they gathered shellfish, rich in omega-3 fatty acids that may have fueled their growing brains. And when the chance arose, they scavenged. Imagine a carcass left by lions, the flesh torn but bones still full of marrow. Homo erectus arrived with stone axes, splitting bones, scraping scraps, claiming nourishment that others overlooked. Survival was not about pride, it was about ingenuity. A quirky detail comes from fossils, gnawed by predators. Many Homo erectus bones bear tooth marks of hyenas and big cats, proof that they were not only hunters but also prey. Imagine the tension of those nights, fire not yet mastered, shelters fragile, eyes glowing in the dark beyond. Sometimes the hunters became the hunted, yet they endured, finding balance in a world where danger pressed from all sides. Scientists still argue about the role of meat in their diet. Some see them as primarily hunters, shaping bodies and tools around the chase. Others argue they were more gatherers, with meat a supplement rather than a staple. The truth may shift with time and place. In one region, roots and fruits; in another, antelopes and elephants. Their strength lay not in one strategy, but in adaptability. Whatever the land offered, they took. Their hunts reveal more than diet. They reveal minds. Cooperative hunting required planning. One group may have driven prey toward others, blocking escape routes, coordinating movements. To achieve this, they must have communicated. Gestures, calls, perhaps proto-words. The hunt became a classroom, a stage for teaching and learning. Children watched, imitated, absorbed skills. Adults refined tactics, remembered patterns, passed them forward. Culture was written in the chase. Picture the scene again. A band gathers at dawn, eyes scanning the horizon. They select a target, share signals, then move as one. Hours pass, sweat pours, but they do not falter. Finally the prey falls, and the group circles. Stones cut, fire if they have it, roasts, meat is divided. Each member eats, from elder to child. In that moment, survival is shared, bonded by effort. The hunt is not just food but community. Their persistence shaped their bodies in subtle ways. Narrow hips allowed efficient running strides. Their Achilles tendons stored and released energy with every step. Their noses cooled air as they ran, protecting lungs from the dry heat. And their shoulders, freed from the demands of climbing, swung with each stride, balancing motion. Every bone carried the signature of endurance. Yet this way of life carried risks. Injuries from falls, exhaustion from heat, attacks from predators during vulnerable moments. Fossils show broken bones healed imperfectly, joints worn from miles of travel, spines strained by endless running. Still they pressed on. Pain was part of the pattern, endurance a necessity. To survive meant to accept the cost. In your mind, the chase slows, the animal lies still, the group breathes heavily, and the sun begins to sink. Meat is shared, tools are cleaned, skins are stretched. Tomorrow another hunt will begin, another test of patience and strength. But tonight they rest, their endurance proven once again. Think of how different this is from your own life. Your food arrives packaged, your body rarely pushed to its biological edge, yet inside you remains the same design, the sweat glands, the tendons, the lungs built for pursuit. You carry their legacy in every breath you take during a jog, in every drop of sweat on a hot day. You are the descendant of runners, of hunters who chased time until it yielded. And as you feel your own pulse slow in bed, you know this truth. Homo erectus survived not because they were the strongest, but because they were relentless. They endured, step after step, year after year, until 2 million years had passed. Their feet carved a rhythm that still beats inside you, even now, as you drift into dreams. The hunt fades into silence, and now you feel the heat of the sun pressing heavier against your skin. The air shimmers, grasses bow under the weight of midday, and beads of sweat roll down your imagined forehead. This is not a trick of your imagination alone. This is the very adaptation that shaped Homo erectus into the most enduring runners on Earth. Sweat, sunlight, skin, the quiet genius of the body itself. Step closer and watch them moving across the savannah. Their bodies are almost bare compared to their ape ancestors, their hair reduced to fine, sparse strands. Their skin glistens with perspiration, droplets forming and vanishing, carrying away heat with every breeze. 2 million years ago, this transformation may have seemed simple, but it was radical. To lose fur meant to risk the cold of night, to face the bite of wind and insects. Yet it gave them mastery of the day. This was endurance through biology. With bare skin and countless sweat glands, Homo erectus could outlast any animal under the scorching sun. The mechanism was elegant. Sweat carried heat from the blood to the surface, evaporating into air, cooling the body from within. Other predators were fast but fragile. Lions collapsed after minutes in the heat, their bodies unable to vent the furnace inside. But Homo erectus, with each bead of sweat, turned weakness into dominance. Scientists still argue about when this great hair loss occurred. Some evidence points to around 1.2 million years ago. Others suggest earlier. The exact timing is blurred in the fossil record, for skin does not fossilize easily, but indirect clues remain. The lice that plague modern humans, for instance, diverged into distinct species millions of years ago. One clings to our heads, another to clothing. That split hints at the moment when fur was lost, when humans began to wear coverings. A quirky window into evolution, revealed not by bones but by parasites. And then there is pigmentation. Early Homo erectus likely carried dark skin, a natural shield against the relentless ultraviolet rays of the tropics. Melanin absorbed the sun's fury, protecting against burns and cancer. But as groups wandered northward, into regions of weaker sunlight, that same dark shield became a challenge. Without enough ultraviolet exposure, vitamin D could not be synthesized. Bones weakened, diseases crept in. Fossil evidence from northern Homo erectus individuals shows signs of such deficiency, fragile bones, warped by lack of sunlight. The story suggests that over time, their skin may have lightened in higher latitudes, a balancing act between protection and necessity. Even now in your own skin, those same pressures echo. Look closer still and notice their shoulders, broad, rotating, built not for swinging in trees, but for throwing. This was another silent adaptation, a partnership with hairless skin. As bodies cooled more efficiently, long chases became possible, and with arms free they could hurl stones or spears with deadly accuracy. Imagine a band driving a gazelle not only with endurance but with projectiles launched from afar. The body had become a weapon, a harmony of bone, muscle, and sweat. Their noses too tell the tale. Prominent bridges jutted forward, not just as features of the face but as tools for survival. Each inhalation passed through a chamber that humidified and warmed air, conserving moisture, protecting lungs from dryness. This adaptation was vital for life on the savannah, where heat threatened to strip the body bare of water. That nose, the one you see in your own mirror, was born in these crucibles of heat and dust. Now, imagine nightfall. Without fur, the cold settles fast. Fire, when mastered, offered warmth. But before then, Homo erectus endured. Perhaps they huddled together, pressed skin against skin, trading body heat in silence. Perhaps they wrapped themselves in hides stripped from prey, crude coverings against the chill. The loss of fur was double-edged, a sacrifice of comfort for the gift of endurance. It was an evolutionary gamble, and it worked. A quirky speculation sometimes suggested by researchers is that sexual selection played a role in hairlessness. Perhaps bare skin became desirable, a signal of health or vitality, spreading through the population not just by survival, but by attraction. Imagine the gleam of sweat under sunlight, the smoothness of skin compared to tangled fur. Beauty, even then, may have played its hand in shaping survival. Scientists still argue about how much this mattered, but the thought lingers. Survival was not only about function but about appeal. Their bodies became laboratories of adaptation. Look at their feet, arches absorbing shock, toes aligned for long strides. Look at their pelvis, narrower than earlier hominins, optimized for walking and running efficiently. Look at their muscles, lean, wiry, conserving energy while sustaining endurance. Each feature tells you the same story. Homo erectus was crafted by time to move, to wander, to chase under the sun, and you, lying here, carry these same gifts. Every bead of sweat on your brow, every gasp of breath after a long run, every stride that propels you forward, all trace back to them. Your body is an echo of theirs, a legacy inscribed in muscle and skin. You are still the endurance hunter, even if your prey is now a treadmill or a daily commute. But their adaptations were not uniform. In higher latitudes, darker skin may have faded, bodies may have thickened, endurance shifted toward resilience against cold rather than heat. This plasticity, the ability to change with environment, was their true genius. While other species specialized and perished, Homo erectus adjusted. Heat, cold, wet, dry. Each challenge shaped them, and they endured. Scientists still argue about how far these adaptations stretched. Did they make clothes early, long before Homo sapiens? Did they build shelters to compensate for bare skin? The evidence is sparse, but hints of huts at sites like Terra Amata suggest they were already bending environments to their needs. Bare skin was not just a vulnerability, it was the beginning of culture, the drive to create what biology alone could not provide. You picture them now, at midday, the sun blazing, they run, their bodies gleaming, their skin alive with adaptation. Each drop of sweat is survival, each stride is victory, and then, at dusk, they huddle, bare but not broken, their resilience glowing as bright as any fire. As you drift further into rest, you understand this truth. Homo erectus survived 2 million years, not by chance but by design, a design etched in sweat, in sunlight, in skin. Their bodies were maps of endurance, guides for your own. And though you rest now in comfort, their legacy beats within you, reminding you that you too are built to last. The day fades into cooler evening air, and you watch shadows stretch across the land. The savannah's endless grasses bow with the wind, and the smell of damp earth rises after a fleeting storm. In this hush, you see something unusual for such an ancient time. Shapes against the horizon that are not trees, not stones, but structures, shelters. Homo erectus did not always surrender to the elements. They bent the environment, rearranged it to suit their needs, and in doing so they built the first true human homes. Imagine a circle of branches driven into the ground, their tips bent inward and lashed together, forming a dome. The floor is lined with stones, perhaps with hides laid across for warmth. At the center a fire flickers, its smoke curling upward through an opening in the roof. This is not a cave provided by nature, it is a hut crafted by intention. The The site of Terra Amata in France, dating back some 350,000 years, offers evidence of such shelters, elongated oval structures as long as 15 meters, hearths carefully placed within. The very idea is staggering. Homo erectus, hundreds of thousands of years before cities, already building walls against the wind. Their homes varied. Some were simple lean-tos made from branches and leaves, just enough to shield from rain or sun. Others were sturdier, circular foundations of stone anchoring posts and walls. In colder regions, they may have draped animal skins across frames, using stone weights to pin the coverings against the ground. These were not permanent villages, but temporary camps adapted to seasons, migrations and prey. Yet each shelter carried the same idea: we do not only endure the world, we shape it. You walk inside one in your imagination. The floor is packed earth, scattered with flakes of stone from tool-making, the char of ancient fires still warm. Against the walls lie bones cracked for marrow, baskets of gathered roots, and hides stretched for drying. Children sit close to the fire, their faces lit in gold, while adults sharpen axes or stitch sinew. Outside, the wind howls, but within there is warmth, safety, community. The shelter is more than protection, it is a gathering place. The first whispers of domestic life. The ability to build was tied to their tools and to their minds. To construct even a simple hut required planning, foresight, cooperation. One individual could not carry heavy branches, but a group could. One person alone could not stretch skins into place, but hands together made it possible. Each hut was a testament not just to survival, but to the bonds of the group. Homo erectus thrived because they learned to live not as scattered individuals, but as communities. A quirky discovery from the German site of Bilsingsleben adds another layer. There, circular arrangements of stones suggest that Homo erectus built structured spaces, perhaps huts, perhaps ritual enclosures. Among the stones lay tools, bones, and what appear to be work areas. Were these simply shelters, or were they also places of gathering and meaning? Scientists still argue, because the evidence is fragmentary, open to interpretation, but the thought lingers within those circles of stone. Perhaps the seeds of ritual were planted. And what of fire inside these homes? By the time shelters appear clearly in the archaeological record, fire is often present too. The combination is powerful. A roof against the rain, a flame against the cold, together allowed Homo erectus to occupy regions far beyond the warmth of Africa. They could survive the chill of Europe, the damp of Asia, the unpredictability of climates. Their homes were not fixed castles, but they were enough to expand the human range across continents. Picture them at night, huddled inside. The fire glows, the walls creak with wind, the smell of smoke mixes with cooking meat. Stories, or at least gestures, sounds, expressions, flow between them. The children drift to sleep under skins, the elders sit closer to the flames, and outside the dark presses but cannot enter. For the first time in history, humans have carved out private space, a division between inside and outside. That boundary changes everything. Inside is safety, warmth, kin. Outside is danger, cold, uncertainty. The shelters also speak to imagination. To build is to envision. A bare patch of ground becomes, in the mind's eye, a hut. A pile of branches becomes a roof. The act of construction is the act of making the invisible visible. And this capacity, this leap of mind, is as important as any tool or fire. It is the root of architecture, of cities, of every structure you live within today. Scientists still debate how widespread such shelters were. Some argue that caves remained the mainstay of Homo erectus, that huts were rare and temporary. Others believe that many shelters existed, but left faint traces, eroded by time, invisible to archaeology. After all, branches rot, skins decay, fire scatters, only stones and bones remain. The truth may be that Homo erectus used both caves when available, huts when needed, adapting to whatever the land offered. Their genius was not in choosing one path, but in choosing all paths. Think of how profound this shift was. Other animals dig burrows, weave nests or build hives, but they do so by instinct. Homo erectus built by choice. They looked at materials, at needs, at weather, and decided. That decision was cultural, learned, taught, transmitted. It was not locked in the body, but carried in the mind. Each shelter was both a physical structure and a cultural inheritance. Now imagine the continuity. A child sits in the hut, watching adults arrange branches, weighing skins with stones, feeding fire. The child grows, remembers, imitates, repeats. Generations pass, and the knowledge endures. Across Africa, Asia, and Europe, this tradition spread, shaping survival. The same story plays forward into your own life. Every time you shut a door, every time you light a lamp, you are repeating the act of creating an inside against an outside. A quirky echo of this is found in the way Homo erectus organized their camps. Some sites show patterns, hearths at the center, tools scattered nearby, refuse placed at the edges. This suggests spatial awareness, a sense of order. Perhaps they had designated areas for sleeping, working, cooking. Scientists still argue whether this was intentional or random, but the patterns hint at something remarkable, the beginning of organized space, the layout of human life. The shelters stand now only in imagination, their wood long gone, their hides turned to dust, yet the stones that anchored them, the ash that marked their fires, remain. These traces whisper across time, telling you that Homo erectus did not simply drift through nature, but reshaped it. As you lie in your own shelter tonight, walls of plaster, ceilings of wood, a bed beneath you, remember that the instinct to build, to carve space against the world, is ancient. It began with branches bent into domes, stones pressed into circles, fires flickering in huts against the wind. Homo erectus, 2 million years ago, made the first human homes, and in those homes the seeds of all future civilization were planted. And now, as you breathe slowly, imagine yourself within one of those huts. The fire warms your face, the wind rattles outside, but cannot touch you, and around you others sleep in safety. You feel the peace of shelter, the comfort of belonging, the continuity of humanity. The night deepens, but you are safe inside. The fire inside that shelter flickers low, and the group begins to settle. But listen closer. The silence is not empty. There are sounds, small, fragmented, and strangely familiar. A low hum, a bark of laughter, a rising call, the hush of breath shaped into tone. Words as you know them may not yet exist, but communication does, as vital as fire or stone. This is the world of whispers without words, the proto-language of Homo erectus. You lean closer to watch. One adult raises a hand, palm outward, signaling the others to wait. Another tilts their head, issuing a sharp grunt toward the darkness where prey might lurk. A child points toward the fire, mimicking the gesture used to ask for food. You see faces alive with expression, eyebrows raised, lips pursed, shoulders shrugged. Without the complexity of grammar or syntax, meaning still flows. This is not silence. It is a river of gestures and sounds carrying knowledge across the group. Scientists still argue about how advanced this proto-language might have been. The fossil evidence is tantalizing but incomplete. The spinal cord canals of Homo erectus fossils suggest narrower passages for nerves than in modern humans, perhaps limiting fine control of breath and voice. Their frontal lobes, too, were smaller, reducing capacity for the complex planning that underlies language. And genetic clues imply that they lacked the fully modern form of the FOXP2 gene, a key ingredient for speech. From this, many conclude that their voices were limited, more like calls and chants than sentences. But evidence of their lives tells another story. They hunted cooperatively, coordinated persistence chases, and passed down intricate traditions of tool-making. To do these things, they must have shared information. Teaching a child to strike flakes from stone requires more than demonstration, a sound to mark success, a grunt to warn of error, a gesture to indicate where to strike. Together these form a proto-language robust enough to transmit skill. You can imagine the scene. A teacher squats beside a child, chips stone, then nods or grunts approval when the child mimics correctly. Learning unfolds in the blend of sight, sound, and signal. A quirky clue comes from the rhythm of tool-making itself. The sequence of strikes required for an Acheulean hand axe has been compared by some researchers to the rhythm of language. Repeated patterns, hierarchical planning, the coordination of hand and mind. Some even suggest that practicing tool-making trained brains for the later leap to full speech. Scientists still argue over whether this is true, but the parallel is tantalizing. Each chip of stone as rehearsal for each syllable of language, communication extended beyond survival. Around campfires, sounds may have carried stories, however simple. A gesture of hands might retell the day's hunt. A sequence of calls might warn of predators. Laughter may have echoed, binding groups with joy. Grooming, a social act inherited from apes, may have been supplemented by vocal reassurance, allowing bonds to stretch beyond touch. The circle of connection widened. Picture them on a hunt. One runner waves an arm to direct others. A shout rises to warn of a turning animal. A chorus of calls echoes as the prey weakens, each voice a strand in the net of the chase. Success depends not only on endurance but on communication, on sharing attention and intent. Now imagine a quieter moment, a mother calming her child. She hums low and rhythmic, her voice a cradle of sound. No words but meaning flows, safety, love, stillness. The child rests soothed by tone alone. Here lies another root of language, not just the need to convey information, but the desire to share emotion. Scientists still argue whether Homo erectus had the capacity for true syntax, the arrangement of sounds into ordered meaning. Some believe they did, pointing to the complexity of their lives. Others see them as limited to simple calls, more elaborate than apes but less than humans. The truth may rest in between, a language without grammar but rich in expression enough to carry them through millions of years. And consider the face itself. Their mouths, their lips, their eyes, all capable of conveying meaning. A raised brow, a twist of the mouth, a tilt of the head, all communicate without words. Even you today rely on these signals, reading faces before you process speech. Homo erectus lived in this world of expression, where meaning was embodied, not abstract. A quirky speculation suggests they may have used song-like calls, rhythmic and melodic, to coordinate or soothe. Think of birds calling, or wolves howling, simple sounds carrying complex social meaning. Perhaps Homo erectus sang to one another, in tones that carried over savanna winds, their voices the earliest music. Scientists still argue, but when you imagine them humming around firelight, the thought feels true. Their communication was not only about sound. Their tools, their shelters, their engravings, all were forms of expression. A hand axe perfectly symmetrical may have conveyed skill or status. A zigzag carved on a shell may have whispered of creativity. Even without words, objects became messages, carrying meaning across eyes and generations. You close your own eyes and listen. The hut is quiet except for the crackle of fire, the murmur of low calls, the rustle of movement. A hand reaches to point, a voice rises in warning, a child giggles. The air is alive with unspoken language, with the flow of communication that bridges minds. You feel it wash over you, a tide older than words, older than writing, older than history itself. And in this moment you realize the roots of your own speech, your own songs, your own whispered goodnights, lie here. Every syllable you speak, every story you tell, is built on this foundation of sound and gesture. Homo erectus may not have spoken as you do, but they began the long journey toward language. They showed that survival is not only about food and fire, but about connection, the ability to share, to teach, to comfort. As you breathe deeper now, you understand your words, your voice are echoes of theirs. You speak because they first gestured, you sing because they first called, you tell stories because they first shared meaning in the dark. And though their whispers have vanished into time, they remain inside you, as steady and essential as breath. The fire dies lower, and outside the night stretches wide, but you notice something within the glow that startles you. Not all faces in this circle are unscarred. One man bears a heavy dent across his skull, a wound that would have killed him had he been alone. Another woman has no teeth left in her jaw, yet the lines of her lips show she lived for many years after they were gone. These are not anomalies. Fossils of Homo erectus carry many such signs: broken bones healed, diseases endured, injuries survived. The meaning is clear, they cared for one another. You watch the toothless elder. Without the ability to chew, she should not have survived. Yet here she is, wrapped in skins near the fire, fed soft roots, fruits, or meat pounded until tender. The younger members bring her food, perhaps out of kinship, perhaps out of custom. Her presence adds wisdom, memory of past hunts, of migration routes, of dangers faced. In caring for her, the group gains more than they give. Scientists still argue about the motivations behind such care. Was it compassion, empathy as you know it, or was it practical, a calculation of benefit? Either way, the result is the same. Survival extended beyond individual strength. For the first time in history, weakness did not mean certain death. Consider the man with the skull fracture. Fossil evidence from sites in Asia shows Homo erectus individuals who suffered crushing injuries yet lived long after. Such survival requires others to have fed, sheltered, and protected them. In a world of predators and harsh climate, this is extraordinary. Violence was common. Skulls show blunt trauma, ribs cracked by blows, yet survival after such wounds shows that healing hands balanced striking ones. A quirky detail emerges from one discovery. A young Homo erectus child with a spinal deformity, likely painful, survived into adolescence. In the wild, such a condition should have doomed them early, but instead they lived, suggesting constant support from the group. You can imagine the child carried when tired, guarded from predators, comforted when in pain. The image is tender, unexpectedly human. You look around the circle and realize that this care shaped their society. It created bonds deeper than mere survival. A child cared for learns to care in return. An elder supported shares stories, skills, and guidance. The group grows stronger, not weaker, through compassion. The foundation of what you know as humanity, cooperation, empathy, community, is being laid here, in firelit huts, hundreds of thousands of years ago. Scientists still debate how widespread such care was. Some argue that only close kin were supported, while others believe compassion extended further, to anyone within the band. But even the minimal interpretation is remarkable. Survival was no longer solitary, it was collective. This care also had ripple effects. By supporting injured members, Homo erectus kept knowledge alive. A wounded hunter could no longer chase prey, but could teach others. An elder unable to forage could still recall migration routes or water sources. Information did not vanish with injury. It endured. You can think of it as the first library, not carved in stone, but carried in living minds, protected by compassion. And with care came emotion. Imagine the grief of losing someone after trying to save them. Imagine the joy of seeing a wounded companion heal. These emotions, too, bound the group. They were not abstract ideas, they were daily experiences, lived in every gesture of feeding, every act of sheltering. A quirky speculation suggests that ritual may have begun in this care. When a companion died, despite efforts to save them, perhaps their body was treated differently. Some fossils show cut marks that might indicate cannibalism, but others could suggest burial or symbolic treatment. Scientists still argue, was this survival behavior, or the stirrings of ritual? The line between the two is thin. Now imagine yourself in that hut. A companion coughs weakly, their breath ragged. Others bring water, fan smoke away, offer food. The group adjusts, slows, waits. This patience, this shared burden, is as important as any tool or fire. Without it, Homo erectus would not have endured 2 million years. The lesson seeps into you as you lie back. Survival was never only about strength, it was about care. It was about the hands that fed the toothless, the arms that carried the weak, the patience that sheltered the injured. These acts echo across time into your own life. Every hospital, every family meal, every kindness offered to the vulnerable, the thread stretches back to them. And so you realize, Homo erectus were not just survivors, they were caretakers, healers, companions. They began the long tradition of human compassion, a tradition that lives in you. The circle around the fire grows quiet, and for a moment you sense a change in the air, as though meaning has begun to reach beyond survival. Someone picks up a shell, smooth and worn by water, and with deliberate strokes scratches a zigzag across its surface. The marks are simple, yet they are not random, they are deliberate. You watch the hand linger, as if considering what has been done. This, scientists believe, may be the earliest known art, carved by Homo erectus nearly 500,000 years ago. It is a strange moment, because it does not feed, it does not shelter, it does not protect, and yet it means something. The carved line, the pattern, the mark left upon the world, it is as though the maker wanted to say, I was here. Scientists still argue about whether such markings truly count as art. Some call them idle scratches, nothing more than accidental. Others see them as the dawn of symbolic thought, the very root of culture. But either way, the act stands out. It was unnecessary for survival, yet it was done. and that makes it extraordinary. You lean closer to see more. Pieces of ochre, red and yellow, ground into powder, may have been used as pigments by Homo erectus. Some evidence suggests they even heated the minerals to create deeper hues. Imagine the moment someone smears red across a rock or even across their skin. It could be decoration, it could be ritual, it could be nothing more than curiosity. But whatever it was expression, it was beauty entering the story of survival. A quirky idea some researchers suggest is that symmetry in tools was not only practical but aesthetic. Etruscan hand axes, shaped into teardrops with perfect balance, often exceed what function requires. A sharp edge could be made with fewer strikes, yet makers pursued symmetry again and again for over 1,000,000 years. Perhaps these tools were also displays of skill, like an artist perfecting form. Some scientists even compare them to peacock's tails, not just tools but signals of attractiveness crafted to impress potential mates. As you watch the fire flicker on the faces of Homo erectus, you can imagine them admiring such tools, passing them hand to hand, murmuring with pride. Perhaps a younger hunter copied the design, learning not just how to make something sharp, but how to make something beautiful. And maybe, too, they told stories. Around the fire, gestures and sounds could weave meaning into patterns. A zigzag carved on a shell may have stood for water, for lightning, or for nothing but itself. You cannot know, but you can sense that something new stirred here. Imagination, the ability to see beyond the immediate, to create not only what was needed, but what was possible. Scientists still argue whether Homo erectus had true symbolic thought, or whether such capacities came later with Homo sapiens. Yet each discovery, a carved shell, a painted stone, a perfectly shaped axe, pushes the question closer. Did they think as you do, in symbols and metaphors, or were they simply experimenting with form? Now imagine one of them holding up the zigzag shell, showing it to the others. Some nod, some ignore it, some smile. The marks catch the firelight, lines of shadow and gleam. For the first time, an object carries meaning not tied to use. It is not food, not shelter, not weapon. It is a thought made visible. This is the seed of everything that would come later. Cave paintings, statues, songs, poems. All of it begins here, in scratches on a shell, in ochre smeared by curious hands. The human impulse to create, to decorate, to symbolize, to remember. It stretches back to Homo erectus. A quirky speculation holds that even rhythmic movement, dance, might have begun in these groups. Picture them swaying around the fire, voices humming, feet stamping lightly. It need not be elaborate to matter. Rhythm bonds groups, soothes children, energizes hunters. Even without instruments, the beat of hands on chests or sticks on logs could echo in the night. Perhaps art was not just seen, but heard and felt in the pulse of bodies moving together. You sit with them now, surrounded by marks and pigments, by symmetry and rhythm. The night is no longer only for fear or for warmth. It is also for beauty. This is what makes you human, the ability to take what is unnecessary and make it essential. And as you drift deeper into this vision, you feel a kinship. Every painting on your wall, every song in your ear, every story whispered before sleep, all of them trace back to this moment. The moment a Homo erectus hand carved a zigzag on a shell and looked at it with thought, perhaps even pride. You realize then, art is not decoration, it is survival of another kind. It keeps memories alive, it binds communities, it sparks imagination. And imagination, more than muscle, is what allows a species to endure. The night stretches on, and the fire's glow fades to embers. But your eyes are drawn beyond the shore. Out past the flickering boundary of land lies water, endless, dark, shifting, and across that water, islands rise like shadows. You would not expect Homo erectus, with no sails, no ropes, no compasses, to reach them. Yet the fossils say otherwise. Somehow, 1,000,000 years ago, they crossed seas. Imagine it, the island of Flores in Indonesia, home to creatures that never swam from the mainland. Stegodons, dwarf elephants, and giant storks lived there, isolated by deep channels of ocean. And yet, among their remains, archaeologists uncovered stone tools unmistakably made by Homo erectus. This means one thing: they crossed. Scientists still argue about how. Did they lash logs into rafts? Did they cling to floating vegetation swept out by storms? Did they push crude canoes into the waves with nothing but hands and hope? The Lombok Strait, one of the barriers they must have crossed, is no gentle river. It is turbulent, swept with currents strong enough to challenge modern boats. Yet somehow, Homo erectus reached the other side, a quirky detail. If they crossed intentionally, this would imply planning, cooperation, and perhaps even a rudimentary knowledge of navigation. You picture them watching the horizon, noticing the silhouettes of land on clear days. Maybe they noticed flocks of birds flying in certain directions, or the drift of debris that suggested distant shores. Curiosity, that same force that led them to scratch zigzags on shells, may have urged them into the unknown. Think of the courage. Imagine stepping into the heaving sea without knowing what lay ahead. Behind you, the familiar safety of forests and fire. Ahead, uncertainty, waves, storms, predators, hunger, and yet they went. The first explorers, long before maps or stars guided travel, pushed beyond what they knew. Scientists still argue whether such journeys were deliberate colonization or accidental drift. A storm could have swept a group clinging to logs into new lands. Yet even if it began by accident, survival required adaptation. Once there, they hunted new prey, shaped tools from new stones, and raised children under strange skies. They turned accident into endurance. You walk the shore beside them. The sand is littered with shells, the waves crash, and beyond the horizon lies mystery. One figure pushes a log into the surf, steadies it, calls to the others with sharp grunts and gestures. A few hesitate, shaking heads, but curiosity wins. They climb aboard, clinging tight, paddling with hands, eyes fixed on the distant outline of land. This moment changes everything. The ocean is not a wall, it is a bridge, and by crossing it, Homo erectus expanded the human world. A quirky speculation suggests that seafaring may have shaped their minds. To set out across water requires imagination, the ability to conceive of land unseen. It requires memory, knowing the direction of currents, the patterns of winds. It requires social bonds, trust that others will paddle beside you into danger. Perhaps voyages honed the very capacities that later blossomed into language, story, and science. Now picture their arrival on an island. The forest smells different, the animals move strangely, the stones are sharper or duller. They test fruits cautiously, observe birds, stalk new prey. Fear gives way to adaptation. Within days they are at home. Fire crackles in a new place, and laughter echoes beneath unfamiliar trees. Scientists still argue about how widespread this ability was. Was it unique to island populations, or did many Homo erectus bands experiment with water crossings? Whatever the answer, the fact remains, they were not bound by land. They looked at the horizon and did not stop. And so you see in them the seed of something you know well. Every voyage of discovery, every ship that left a safe shore for the unknown, carries their spirit. The same daring impulse that pushed them across the Lombok Strait would, 1,000,000 years later, carry humans across oceans and eventually into space. As the surf crashes around you, you sense what this means. Homo erectus was not simply surviving. They were expanding, exploring, testing limits. They were already asking the oldest human question, what lies beyond? And though their rafts are gone, though their voices are silent, the echo remains. Each time you look at the sea, each time you dream of distant worlds, you inherit their courage. You too are standing at the shore, watching horizons. You too are part of their voyage. The sea fades into silence, and when you turn back toward the firelit camps, you notice something more unsettling. Not every mark on the bones around you was left by tools shaping meat or splitting marrow from animals. Some belonged to humans themselves. Skulls with cracks from blunt force, long bones with cut marks strangely similar to butchery, and faces bearing evidence of trauma. The story of Homo erectus is not only about endurance and care, it is also about shadows. You picture the scene: a fight breaks out near the riverbank. Two males clash, their heavy brows furrowed, stones raised as weapons. The blow lands hard, cracking bone. The injured one falls, but does not die immediately. In the fossil record, healed fractures show that sometimes such blows were survived, sometimes not. Violence was part of their world, as much as fire and food. scientists still argue about the meaning of these injuries. Were they accidents from hunting or tool-making, or deliberate strikes, evidence of conflict within the group? Some fractures line up with what would happen if one skull was struck again and again. That suggests intent, not misfortune. A quirky discovery adds more tension. At some sites, bones of Homo erectus show cut marks indistinguishable from those left on hunted animals. Did they eat their own kind? Some say yes, that cannibalism was practiced, whether out of desperation, ritual, or habit. Others argue the marks might come from predators. Hyenas and big cats also chewed and cracked bones. The truth may never be certain. You imagine the horror and the ritual. A group gathered around a body, not burying it but cutting it. Maybe they whispered sounds you cannot understand. Maybe they believed they were taking strength into themselves, or maybe they were only hungry. Scientists still argue whether such acts were survival strategies during famine, or whether they carried symbolic meaning, an early form of ritual, a primitive echo of ceremony. And then there is the possibility of trophies. Some skulls appear modified, the top sliced clean, perhaps used as bowls or displayed as symbols of power. Was this the birth of hierarchy? Was dominance marked not only by strength, but by possession of a rival's skull? You cannot know, but the thought lingers like smoke. Violence is never the whole story, but it is always part of it. Even as Homo erectus cared for their wounded, they struck down others. Even as they crafted tools of beauty, they used them to wound. They were human in this balance, capable of kindness, capable of cruelty. A quirky parallel lies in modern hunter-gatherers. Some anthropologists compare early human violence to chimpanzee raids, where groups attack rivals at territorial boundaries. Perhaps Homo erectus too fought over resources, mates, or status. Their world was not endless abundance. Competition was fierce, predators lurked, food was scarce. To kill another band was to survive another season. Still, not every fracture is proof of malice. Some are the result of falls, accidents, the heavy work of stone. Scientists debate endlessly, balancing evidence between accident and intent. But the mere possibility of cannibalism, of violence woven into daily life, changes how you see them. You sit by the fire and picture both sides, the elder being fed soft roots, and the skull cracked by blows, the shell carved with care, and the bone marked with knives. This duality defines Homo erectus, not saints, not monsters, but complex beings navigating survival with every tool at hand. And perhaps strangely, even their darkest acts carried seeds of culture. If cannibalism was ritual, it was also symbolism. The idea that meaning could be attached to death, that flesh could stand for power or continuity. That is thought, however unsettling. That is imagination. Scientists still argue if these behaviors were rare outliers or widespread norms. Were most Homo erectus peaceful, only rarely driven to violence, or was conflict a constant shadow? The answer flickers like the fire, unclear, shifting, never still. You lean back into the night, and you realize something else. The same shadows follow your own kind. Violence, cruelty, even cannibalism exist in your history too. Yet alongside them are compassion, care, and art. To be human is to hold both, and so it was for Homo erectus. Their bones whisper of battles and betrayals, of meals both ordinary and unthinkable, of rituals you cannot decipher. Yet through it all they endured for 2 million years. The darkness did not erase them. It was simply part of their story, part of yours too. The camp grows quieter after the whispers of violence, but the world of Homo erectus is not theirs alone. Other shadows move through the forests and plains, some human, some not. You realize that they were not a lonely species. They lived alongside cousins, rivals, and possible partners in survival. Step with them into a time when the family tree of humanity was not a single trunk but a tangled grove. To one side, in Africa, Homo habilis still knapped tools as Homo erectus began to stride taller. For nearly 500,000 years, the two lived side by side. Scientists still argue whether habilis was swept aside by erectus or whether they shared landscapes in an uneasy balance. The evidence suggests overlap. Tools mingled at the same sites, fossils layered in the same sediments. For a time, two different humans breathed the same air, and there were others. Homo rudolfensis, with broader faces and heavier jaws, roamed the Rift Valley. Paranthropus, a robust cousin, chewed roots with massive teeth. Later, Denisovans and Neanderthals would appear, perhaps descendants of branches that split from Erectus lines. And on a far-off island, long after Erectus had spread, tiny beings you know as Homo floresiensis, the hobbits, made their homes in caves. You stand among them, and it feels less like one species' story and more like a chorus. The landscape is alive with variations of human possibility, each testing survival in its own way. Some are stronger, some smaller, some more inventive. The Earth is not ruled by one human, but by many. A quirky twist enters here: lice. Genetic studies of lice suggest that around 1.2 million years ago, a new strain began spreading between different hominin groups. This implies not only proximity, but physical contact, clothing, grooming, or even mating might have been shared. It is a quiet, microscopic witness that Homo erectus did not live entirely apart, but brushed against the lives of their cousins. Scientists still argue about the extent of interaction. Did Erectus interbreed with these others? Fossil evidence is elusive, but genetic whispers in modern humans hint at archaic contributions that may trace back further than Neanderthals. If true, part of you carries Erectus still, not only in memory, but in blood. Imagine the encounters. A band of Erectus meets another group at a watering hole. The strangers look almost human, broad-browed, heavy-jawed, yet familiar. At first there is tension, the clutch of stones, the narrowing eyes, but perhaps not every meeting ended in violence. Perhaps some ended in exchange, tools, foods, even mates. The family tree does not grow in straight lines. It tangles, bends, fuses, and yet competition was inevitable. Where ranges overlapped, resources grew scarce. Two species might hunt the same herd, gather the same roots, seek the same shelter. Conflicts would flare, and in time some lines dwindled while others flourished. Homo erectus's endurance shows they often won these contests, holding ground for nearly 2 million years. A quirky speculation among some researchers is that Homo erectus in Asia may represent not just a single species, but several. Some fossils suggest distinct forms, one more robust, another more slender. Were they variations of a single adaptable species, or were they separate humans entirely, surviving side by side? Scientists still argue, the fossil record, teasing but not answering. You sense now the richness of this ancient world. Imagine waking each day not knowing who else you might encounter, not just lions or hyenas, but other humans, not quite you, not quite strangers. Some you might fight, some you might fear, some you might welcome. The world was full of mirrors, each reflecting a slightly different possibility of what it meant to be human, and perhaps this very competition shaped Erectus into what they became. To endure so long, they had to adapt not only to climate, predators, and hunger, but also to rivals who were almost themselves. In their victories and their losses, the shape of humanity was forged. As you drift deeper into the story, you realize that the idea of a single human species dominating the Earth is new, fragile, and temporary. For most of history, there were many. Homo erectus lived in that chorus for longer than your species has even existed, and in the silence of their bones, you hear it still, the echo of cousins, the murmur of rivals, the possibility that the world could have belonged to someone else. The plains recede, and now you follow Homo erectus upward, toward the mountains. The air thins, the wind sharpens, and each step presses harder against your lungs. Above 4,000 meters, the earth turns barren, rocks and snow stretching in every direction. And yet here, astonishingly, traces of their presence remain. Imagine the Tibetan Plateau nearly 1.6 million years ago, a place where oxygen is scarce, where even today newcomers struggle for breath. Fossils and stone tools reveal that Homo erectus reached these heights long before most creatures of their kind would dare. You picture them crouched behind rocks, striking flakes from stone, their breath visible in the icy air. Scientists still argue about how they managed such extremes. Modern Tibetans carry genetic adaptations that help their blood process oxygen more efficiently. Some speculate that these traits may reach back to archaic humans like Erectus or Denisovans, who left their mark on populations through ancient interbreeding. If so, your ability to breathe at altitude may be a gift from these distant wanderers. A quirky detail emerges from isotope studies of ancient teeth. Diets here included highland plants and grazing animals, proof that Erectus did more than pass through. They stayed long enough to adapt, long enough to make the plateau a home. Fires smoldered against the cold, shelters rose against the wind, and children grew up where air itself felt thin. You walk among them and feel the strain. Each inhale burns, each exhale clouds into mist. Yet Erectus presses on, driven by the same resilience that carried them across continents. Their shoulders roll forward, their strides steady, each movement an assertion against the mountain's resistance. The adaptations that served them in the heat of the savannah, sweating, endurance, strong legs, now face new challenges. Heat is no advantage here. Warmth becomes precious. Fire grows even more vital, a shield against frostbite, a guardian in the night. You see a band huddled close around embers, shoulders touching, eyes half closed against the howl of the wind. Scientists still argue whether this high-altitude settlement was temporary or permanent. Were these families living year-round on the plateau, or seasonal wanderers following migrating herds? Fossils and tools suggest both possibilities. Perhaps some bands ventured high in summer, retreating in winter. Others may have remained, stubborn as the stones, proving that even here life could endure, and endurance is the key. Picture a persistence hunt, not on open plains but across icy ridges. A herd of antelope flees uphill, lungs burning in the thin air. Erectus pursues, not with speed but with relentlessness. Step after step, hour after hour, they follow until prey collapses in exhaustion. The hunters close in, their spears raised, their breaths ragged but unstoppable. A quirky speculation holds that living at altitude may have fueled their minds as much as their bodies. Reduced oxygen challenges the brain, pushing it to adapt, to innovate. Could life in such harshness have sparked new resilience of thought? Could these mountains have sharpened their endurance not only of muscle, but of mind? The evidence is thin, but the idea lingers like mountain mist. As you walk with them across the plateau, you see that Homo erectus was not bound to one environment. They lived in savannahs, in forests, by rivers, on coasts, and here in the roof of the world. Their adaptability was unmatched. They were not specialists bound to one niche, but generalists, able to survive wherever chance carried them. Scientists still argue whether this ecological flexibility was their greatest gift or their eventual downfall. By being good at many things but masters of none, did they endure long but fail to innovate enough to outlast new rivals? Or was their very flexibility the reason they survived so much longer than nearly any other human species? The debate continues, but the evidence here, in the thin air, suggests resilience beyond measure. You pause at the edge of a cliff, the world spread below like an endless map, valleys filled with shadow, peaks catching the last light. Homo erectus stands beside you, silent, watching. They cannot name the horizon, but they feel its call, and in their steady breath, their unyielding stance, you recognize the same endurance that still lives in you. The mountain is not theirs, not fully, not forever. But for a time against all odds they claimed it. They carved tools from its rocks, hunted its herds, raised fires against its cold, and in doing so, they proved again that no place was beyond the reach of human will. The mountains fade behind you now, their peaks dissolving into the haze of time, and what rises instead is a sense of decline. The long story of Homo erectus stretches nearly 2 million years, but no tale lasts forever. You follow them into a world that begins to shift beneath their feet. Climates changing, forests expanding, deserts creeping, and rivals emerging. The long dusk of their reign begins. Imagine a band of erectus in Java, the last refuge where they survived long after other populations had vanished. The forests here grow thicker, wetter, more tangled as the ice ages reshape the globe. Rainforests spread and open savannas shrink. For a species built on persistence, hunting, endurance in open plains, and fire in open camps, this new environment becomes a slow trap. Game animals dwindle, visibility shortens, and the rains smother fires before they can grow. What was once advantage now becomes burden. Scientists still argue about exactly why Homo erectus disappeared. Some say it was climate, cycles of glaciation that reshaped continents, forests, and coasts, stripping them of the niches where they once thrived. Others point to rivals, Homo heidelbergensis, Denisovans, Neanderthals, and eventually Homo sapiens. Each new species brought new tools, larger brains, and fresh strategies. Against these, Erectus stone axes and long endurance began to falter. A quirky twist is that even as their world narrowed, they clung to their ways with remarkable conservatism. For over 1 million years, their Acheulean hand axes changed little, teardrop shapes chipped with the same methods, passed down across endless generations. Some archaeologists see this as stubborn brilliance, proof of stability and success. Others see it as limitation, a reluctance to innovate that eventually left them vulnerable when the world shifted. Scientists still argue whether stability was their strength or their downfall. Picture one of their last camps. Fires glow dimly beneath a canopy of dripping leaves. The hand axes they carry are nearly identical to those their ancestors held 500,000 years earlier. Around them, the forests stir with the sounds of predators, and the rains fall endlessly. The elders tell no stories you would understand, but they pass on techniques for shaping stone, for hunting in the shadows, for surviving in a world already moving beyond them. And then, in another place, you see the first sparks of modern humans. Homo sapiens begins to spread, carrying not only tools but language, symbolic thought, and rapid innovation. Where Erectus chipped the same axes for centuries, Sapiens carved new shapes in a single generation. Where Erectus crossed seas in mystery, Sapiens would soon map the globe. The balance tips, but decline does not mean erasure. Even as Homo erectus faded, they endured longer than almost any human species before or since. From Africa to Asia, they outlasted rivals, predators, and catastrophes. They survived volcanic eruptions, ice ages, droughts, and floods. Their final chapters may have been written in isolation, but they were not failures. They were simply the last notes of a long song. A quirky possibility whispers from the genetic record. Fragments of archaic DNA appear in modern humans, and while most trace to Neanderthals or Denisovans, some researchers suspect that faint echoes could belong to Erectus. If true, then they never entirely disappeared. Parts of their resilience, their endurance, their ancient adaptations may still live in your cells, hidden and unacknowledged, but enduring all the same. Scientists still argue how long they truly survived. The last known fossils in Java date to about 108,000 years ago, but some evidence suggests small groups could have lingered even later, hiding in pockets of stability. Perhaps they lived until 70,000 years ago, even brushing against the time when modern humans began arriving in Southeast Asia. If so, there may have been encounters, brief, fleeting, unrecorded, between the last of them and the first of us. You close your eyes and try to picture that meeting. A Homo erectus band emerging from the forest, heavy-browed, silent, carrying axes. A Homo sapiens band, lighter-framed, carrying spears and language. They meet at a riverbank. There is no record of what happens next. Do they fight, trade, glimpse one another across the water and move on? No one knows. All that remains is silence. The decline of Homo erectus is not a tragedy, but a reminder. Every species, no matter how adaptable, faces an ending. 2 million years of endurance did not guarantee forever. Climate shifts faster than muscles can adapt. Rivals rise with sharper tools. Environments change and strategies that once worked crumble. And as you lie back with the story, the lesson presses against you gently. Your own kind has survived only 300,000 years so far, a brief flicker compared to their long glow. You probably won't survive this span. Your civilization is far younger still, only thousands of years old. If Erectus fell, what makes you think Sapiens is untouchable? Yet even in decline, they leave a gift. The very fact that they lasted so long is proof of resilience, of adaptability, of cultural survival. Their story is not one of failure, but of endurance, a reminder that life can bend and bend again, surviving almost anything. And so, as their shadow fades, you find yourself walking with them into the dusk of their kind, not in mourning, but in awe. The dusk of decline gives way now to the quieter glow of memory, and you realize that Homo erectus did not vanish without leaving traces more profound than fossils and stone. They left echoes in culture, in technology, and perhaps even in your own mind. To understand them fully, you must look not only at how they lived, but at what they passed forward. the legacy that lingers long after their bones turn to stone. Imagine sitting by a fire that flickers in the darkness, its warmth wrapping around you as sparks drift into the night sky. The flames themselves are part of their gift. Homo erectus was the first of all humans to tame fire, or at least to carry and nurture it. Some of the oldest hearths, scorched stones and ash pits over 1 million years old, whisper of their skill. Though scientists still argue whether they mastered fire starting or merely preserved embers from lightning strikes, the truth is that their lives were forever altered by fire's presence. Cooking softened meat, made roots and tubers digestible, and released more calories for growing brains. Smoke kept insects away, and firelight stretched waking hours into the night. Around these flames, groups gathered not just for survival, but for something more. In the glow, knowledge was passed on, tools were shaped, and bonds were strengthened. Some researchers even speculate that the rhythm of stories, the beginnings of narrative, may have started here, where faces flickered red and gold. A quirky artifact deepens the picture, a zigzag engraving on a shell from Java, over 400,000 years old. The simple pattern, carved deliberately, is one of the earliest known signs of symbolic behavior. Was it art, a doodle, a mark of ownership? Scientists still argue, but whatever its purpose, it reveals that Homo erectus could think beyond the immediate, reaching toward abstraction. And from such small scratches, the vast canvases of human culture would later unfold. Their tools were another gift. The Acheulean hand axe, teardrop-shaped, sharp-edged, endlessly replicated, became one of the most enduring technologies in history. For over 1 million years, this design was passed faithfully from hand to hand, generation to generation, across continents. To hold one is to feel the weight of continuity itself. It was not just a tool, but a tradition, proof that culture could outlast any single life. Scientists still argue whether this stability shows genius or conservatism, but there is beauty in its constancy, like a melody repeated for centuries. And then there is the sea. Evidence suggests that Homo erectus reached islands beyond sight of land, Flores, Roti, perhaps others in Indonesia, a feat that demanded more than luck. To cross such waters, they may have built rafts or simple boats, pushed out into currents that could easily have swallowed them. If true, then they were the first mariners, the first to look at the horizon and wonder what lay beyond. Imagine it, a group pushing logs into surf, tying them with vines, stepping aboard with trembling legs. The waves rise and fall, the coastline slips behind, and the world becomes nothing but water and sky. No maps, no compass, only courage and the pull of curiosity. That act, the willingness to risk the unknown, is one you still carry. It is the spark behind every voyage, every leap into mystery. Even in their decline, they carried compassion. Fossils show individuals who lived long after losing teeth, surviving only because others fed them. Children with spinal deformities were cared for well into adolescence. Wounded hunters lived months or years after injuries that should have ended them. These were not solitary creatures, they tended one another, proving that empathy was not born with modern humans, but much earlier. A quirky debate continues among scientists. Did Homo erectus have language? Their throats may not have shaped the full range of sounds modern speech requires, and their spinal canals may have limited vocal control. Yet their social lives, their tools, and their migrations hint at communication, more complex than grunts alone. Perhaps they spoke in tones and gestures, with words as fragile as wind. Scientists still argue, but one thing is clear. They found ways to share knowledge, to pass on traditions that lasted far longer than any one voice. Their legacy stretches even into genetics. Some fragments of DNA in modern humans may bear echoes of archaic hominins, like Erectus. The evidence is murky, but it suggests that their story did not end in extinction alone. Instead, pieces of their resilience may have flowed forward, blending invisibly into the mosaic of modern humanity. Step back and look at the full picture. Fire, tools, seafaring, compassion, art, endurance. These are not minor footnotes, but the very foundations of what it means to be human. To speak around a fire, to shape stone with intent, to cross into the unknown, to care for the vulnerable. All of these began with them. They may not have painted caves or written songs, but they lit the first sparks of culture that would blaze later in your kind, and perhaps that is why their story matters so much. For 2 million years they carried the torch of humanity, and when their time ended, others picked it up, not from nothing, but from a path already laid. In their endurance, in their stubborn survival, in their simple but profound innovations, they carved the shape of all that would come. So you walk beside them one last time, feeling the warmth of their fires, hearing the scrape of their tools, watching their rafts push into waves. Their bones may lie silent, but their legacy still breathes in you. The legacy they left does not end with tools, fire, or compassion. It spills into something more elusive, more difficult to measure. The flickers of consciousness, the slow rise of awareness that stretched beyond survival into reflection. As you walk with Homo erectus through their final centuries, you begin to sense that they were not only bodies moving through landscapes, but minds awakening to the strange power of thought. Picture them seated at dusk, firelight painting shadows against stone. The children sleep close to their mothers. The hunters polish their axes with slow, rhythmic strokes. Someone takes a piece of ochre, red, soft, earthy, and rubs it against stone, leaving streaks of color. The act has no direct use. It feeds no stomach, builds no shelter, kills no prey. Yet the hand persists, marking surface with pigment. Scientists still argue whether this was decoration, ritual, or mere idle curiosity. But in that gesture lies the earliest stirrings of symbolic thought. A quirky artifact, the zigzag shell engraving from Java, returns to your mind. A line cut across a surface, repeated with intention, not random, not accidental. It suggests a mind that could imagine something not present, something beyond. Was it a symbol? A practice etching? The debate continues, but what matters is the possibility that Homo erectus looked inward and outward at once, perceiving not only the world but their place within it. Consciousness, after all, is not a sudden switch but a slow sunrise. For Erectus, that sunrise glowed faint and early. Their tools required planning, their hunts required cooperation, their care for the sick required empathy. Scientists still argue whether such traits prove the presence of self-awareness, but you can feel it in the weight of their choices. To carry fire across miles, to shape stone with patience, to cross seas without sight of land, these are not instincts alone, but decisions shaped by thought. Imagine one of them gazing at the night sky, stars burning above the savannah. Did they recognize patterns? Did they wonder at the cold lights overhead? You cannot know. No words remain, no stories etched in caves. But the possibility itself is enough to soften the silence. Even their social lives whisper of richer inner worlds. Bands cooperated in hunts, shared food and cared for the weak. Such acts suggest not only instinct but foresight, an understanding that another's survival supports the group, that compassion itself can be strategy. Yet compassion is more than strategy. It is also feeling, the sound of a child's cry, the gaze of an elder, the memory of a lost companion. These may have stirred emotions not unlike your own. A quirky speculation lingers in research: could Homo erectus experience mental time travel? The ability to imagine future hunts, to recall past dangers, to replay events in the mind. Their planning and tool-making hint at such capacities. Scientists still argue whether this was true autonoetic consciousness, the self-aware sense of being across time, but the seeds of it may well have been planted in their minds. Now you move closer, imagining the rhythms of their days, morning hunts, midday rest in shade, evening fires. Between these tasks there is space for gestures, for laughter, for mimicry. Some anthropologists suggest they lived within a mimetic culture, where dance, gesture, and imitation carried knowledge forward. Children learned not only by watching, but by playing, rehearsing the acts of adults. In those moments, the body became language, and memory became culture. And what of death? Fossils show burials of later species, but Erectus leaves no clear graves. Yet bones reveal signs of survival after severe injury, meaning death was delayed by group care. Did they mourn? Did they sit beside bodies, puzzled by stillness? Scientists still argue, but you can imagine it. A hush falling over the camp, firelight flickering against unmoving faces. Even without ritual, The awareness of absence may have sparked the first shadows of grief. As you drift us deeper into their presence, you realize how much of what you call human began here. Planning, empathy, awareness, curiosity, the stirrings of art. These are not inventions of modern humans, but legacies built layer by layer, stone by stone, thought by thought, and yet their consciousness was not yours. Their brains grew quickly in childhood, reaching adult size earlier than modern humans. This meant shorter childhoods, faster independence, less prolonged learning. Their mental worlds were likely simpler, less elaborate, but still profound in their own way. They lived not in the abstraction of language, but in the immediacy of gesture and sound. Their thoughts may have been images, sensations, rhythms rather than words. A quirky analogy comes to you. Perhaps their minds were like the first sparks of fire, small, fragile, flickering, but enough to illuminate the dark. Not the blaze of later humanity, but the glow that made blaze possible. You return now to the image of their shell engraving, their ochre streaks, their fire circles. These fragments are whispers, telling you that they were more than survival machines. They were thinkers, dreamers in embryo, beings who carried inside them the beginnings of reflection. So you close your eyes and feel their minds brush against yours across the gulf of time. Not in words, but in impressions, the weight of stone in hand, the heat of fire on skin, the rhythm of footsteps chasing prey, the hush of night broken by a child's laugh. These sensations are as human as any thought, and they belong to you because they first belonged to them. The trail of Homo erectus stretches behind you now, nearly 2 million years long, and as you walk its final stretch, you feel the weight of what has been inherited. Their bodies are gone, their voices silent, but the marks they left are not erased. They are in the fire that warms your night, in the tools that shape your world, in the quiet instinct to care for one another, and in the restless urge to step into the unknown. You carry them even now. Look back at what you've seen. They rose in Africa, walking upright with faces that began to resemble your own. They fanned across 3 continents, their footprints pressed into soil from Kenya to Georgia to Java. They survived in deserts, forests, mountains, and coasts, adapting to every environment they entered. They hunted with endurance, carved axes that endured unchanged for 1,000,000 years, crossed seas that should have swallowed them, and built shelters where fire smoked against stone. They lived longer than any human species has lived so far, and their memory is written into the earth itself. And yet, like all stories, theirs came to an end. Climate shifted, rivals emerged. Their long, stable tools became insufficient against species that innovated faster. The rains of Java smothered their fires, the predators of the night claimed their camps, and the slow pressure of change left them behind. But extinction does not mean erasure. Their genetic traces may ripple still through modern bloodlines. Their cultural sparks burned into every human act that followed. Scientists still argue whether Homo erectus should be remembered as innovators or as traditionalists, whether their long stability was triumph or trap, but perhaps the truth is both. They endured by repeating what worked, and they paved the way for those who would later leap into novelty. Without their stability, there would be no foundation on which innovation could stand. Without their 2 million years, your 300,000 would have no soil to grow from. There are quirky fragments that linger in your mind. The zigzag etched on a shell, the ochre streaks on stone, the bones of the injured, healed by care, the footprints in volcanic ash that show a modern gait, the rafts that must have floated against the tides. Each is a whisper, small and fragile, but together they weave a story that will not fade. And so, as you lie here, listening in the half-dark of your own room, you can feel their breath on your neck, not frightening, but familiar. They are not aliens from a distant past. They are kin. They walked as you walk, they sweated as you sweat, they dreamed in ways you can almost remember. Their endurance whispers a lesson that survival is not about perfection, but about persistence, care, and adaptation. Close your eyes and imagine the final camp of Homo erectus. The fire burns low, rain patters on leaves, and the night is heavy with the scent of wet earth. They sit together, their bodies lean and scarred, their faces lit orange by the flames. They do not know they are the last of their kind. They only know the rhythm of life, hunting, feeding, caring, enduring. In their silence you hear the echoes of everything that would come after. Your world is faster now, louder, more fragile in ways they never knew. but the thread that binds you to them is strong. Every match you strike, every tool you hold, every meal you share in company, every restless urge to go beyond the horizon, these are their gifts. They lived long enough to shape the essence of humanity, and in doing so they continue to live within you. And perhaps that is the greatest legacy, not survival forever, but survival long enough to pass the torch. They held it for 2 million years, now it rests in your hands. And now, the fire dims, and the night stretches long. You have walked with Homo erectus through their rise, their endurance, their quiet brilliance, and their eventual fading. You have seen their fires burn against the dark, felt their footprints beneath your steps, and watched the long arc of their survival reach across nearly 2 million years. But the story does not end in sharpness. It softens here, in your breathing, in the quiet of this moment. The world of Homo erectus drifts into mist, and you are left with their warmth, their resilience, their calm endurance that asks nothing more than to keep going, one day into the next. Let the images dissolve slowly, the flicker of firelight, the scrape of stone, the hush of rain on leaves. Let the sounds blur into a lull that rocks you gently, as they might have rocked their children beneath the safety of a fire's glow. The lesson is not of fear but of peace, that survival is not always struggle, but also care, stability and quiet strength. Breathe in slowly, feel the warmth of your own shelter, the safety of this moment, the long continuity that stretches back through time. You are part of a story older than cities, older than writing, older even than your own kind. That story hums inside you still, steady and calm. Now let yourself drift. Let the darkness hold you. Let the weight of history fade to nothing but comfort. You are safe. You are part of something vast, and for tonight, you can rest in the quiet knowledge that survival is not a race, but a rhythm, and tomorrow the story will continue. Good night, traveler. Sleep well.